What if I told you that the longest Christmas in the world had nothing to do with Christianity? In case you missed it, the world's longest Christmas season is celebrated in the Philippines. And it begins from September 1st and it goes all the way to January on the Feast of the Three Kings, aka the Epiphany. Now, while most Christian traditions celebrate for 12 days, Filipinos have been doing at least 18 weeks. We're talking about 4 months. 4 months of Christmas music, vibrant decorations, and festive celebrations. Not to mention the mouth-watering food. Now, most Filipinos think that it is because of the bare months. September, October, November, December, the bare months. I mean, it makes sense. And others think that it is because of marketing, capitalism, to make more money. It also makes sense. But the thing is, our ancestors had long been celebrating this season for centuries, if not for thousands of years, long before Christianity came to our islands. Mabuhay! Earn Kapampangan, luwid kayo! Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Kirby Araullo, your friendly Pinoy historian and culture bearer. As many of you requested, today's video is an expanded version of a video I made about this topic many years ago, many pounds ago. And what I discovered through the years of research, along with my upbringing as a culture bearer, is evidence that our ancestors were already celebrating the season of abundance and rebirth for centuries, long before Christianity even arrived. And the timing was not just, based on a fixed calendar date. The timing of these celebrations was based on a sophisticated environmental wisdom that most Filipinos today have never heard about. Now, what I'm sharing today is also just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a much bigger puzzle. Just one thread in our people's interwoven cultures and history. I mean, what is now the Philippines is incredibly diverse, with over 100 languages, over 100 ethnic groups, each with their own history, culture, and traditions. And not to mention centuries, if not thousands of years, of cultural exchanges between what is now the Philippines and the rest of the world. So if there's something that I missed, or anything that you want to add from your own cultures, your roots, and your backgrounds in the Philippines or beyond, let us know in the comments below. Let us all learn from one another. Everyone thinks that they know exactly why Filipinos start Christmas in September. But the thing is, if you think about it, they're barely scratching the surface. Let's start with what most people already know, because these explanations are completely legitimate. They're completely true, but they're just not the whole story. So first we have the famous Ber months. September, October, November, December. They all end in Ber. So naturally, that's when Christmas season begins, right? And you hear this explanation everywhere. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense to Filipinos. But then we also have, in our culture, our love for countdowns and building anticipation. Many Filipino families will start their Christmas countdown exactly 100 days before Christmas Eve, which lands on September 16th. And you'll also see this countdown reinforced in mass media and pop culture. You'll see this countdown on the morning shows and even on the evening news every single day, beginning on September 16th all the way to Christmas Eve. And if you love building excitement for celebrations, and let's be real, let's be honest, Filipinos are masters at stretching out the anticipation for any party. So if you think about it, this timeline creates the perfect extended runway for our biggest holiday. But of course, we also cannot ignore the commercial reality, the realities of capitalism. Because extended Christmas season means extended shopping season, extended marketing budgets, extended everything Christmas related, and that is a lot of business opportunities. So the economic incentives are absolutely there, and retailers have definitely leaned hard into this 4-month celebration, this long window of business opportunities since the Americans introduced more commercialized holiday traditions. Then there's also just, our people's deep cultural instinct for celebration. Our diverse people in the Philippines, we're the people who find reasons to throw parties to celebrate for everything. For graduations, homecomings, successful harvests, surviving Monday, and so many more. I mean, think about it. We literally have festivals for almost everything under the sun. And all of these factors are real, and they all contribute to why we celebrate Christmas from September to January. But here's what most people don't know about Filipino Christmas traditions. Something that fascinates me as a historian and actually explains why these extended celebrations felt so natural to us Filipinos. So what my elders taught me is that our September celebrations have a much deeper environmental foundations than most people realize. We're talking about sophisticated indigenous knowledge systems that recognized and celebrated natural patterns, patterns that are consistent in our islands for thousands of years. I mean, the modern explanations are all valid, the bare months, the countdowns, the commercial factors, but they attach so easily to September because that timing already had deep cultural significance, meaning that our ancestors were already marking the season as special long before Christianity even arrived. So the Western month of September coincides with something that our ancestors understood as a critical environmental transition. Something that meant the difference between survival and abundance, especially for agricultural communities throughout the Philippines. And this timing was not arbitrary based on a fixed calendar, but it was based on reading natural signs. Signs from Mother Nature that, announcing the most important seasonal shift of the entire year. Our ancestors had sophisticated ways of reading Mother Nature, ways that most Filipinos today have sadly forgotten. So what exactly were our ancestors reading in Mother Nature? What signs were they looking for that told them it was time to celebrate? For example, in Kapampangan culture, the western month of September coincides with the coming of Amihan, or the cold north wind known as Amihan in Tagalog. Now, this is not just, about weather patterns. For our ancestors, this was like nature's own calendar system, Mother Nature announcing that everything was about to change. So the arrival of Amihan traditionally signals the end of the typhoon season and the beginning of the harvest season, or what we call pamamupul in Kapampangan. Okay, so before you comment that, no, Kirby, you're wrong. Typhoons go all the way to November. I know that. I know that nowadays, typhoons can go all the way to November. But the thing is, if you look at historical data, going back to the Spanish colonial records from the late 1500s, the typhoon season in the Philippines historically consistently wind down between September and October. But nowadays, thanks to climate change, typhoons can go all the way into November. In fact, the world's most devastating typhoon that ever made landfall, Typhoon Haiyan, aka Typhoon Yolanda, happened in November. But that is because of the ever-worsening climate crisis we're all facing today. Now back to our topic, this transition from what we call habagat in Tagalog or abayat in Kapampangan, the southwest monsoon, transitioning into amihan or amihan, the northeast monsoon, this transition is a massive atmospheric pattern that affects the entire Philippine archipelago. In fact, it affects many parts of the world. So during the season of habagat or abayat, roughly between June to September, you get this hot and humid weather, with frequent heavy rainfall and devastating storms. So this is, typhoon season, flood season, the time when our agricultural communities are basically hunkering down, and trying to survive the most dangerous weather of the year. But when Amihan or Amihan arrives, everything transforms. Now you have, cooler wind, drier air, and lower humidity. This is the end of the most destructive storm season, the end of the typhoons. So if you think about it, for any indigenous society in what is now the Philippines, for any society that relies heavily on agriculture, this atmospheric shift would have been the single most important calendar marker of the entire year. It literally meant the difference between survival and abundance, between communities barely making it through another season, and communities having enough surplus to celebrate and share their harvest. Now here's the really fascinating part. Our ancestors had a living and breathing calendar system that is all around them. Just imagine, you're a farmer hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, and you're struggling with your harvest. Then suddenly, these birds arrived when you need them the most. So the coming of Amihan wasn't just measured by wind directions or temperature changes. It was also announced by the arrival of the sacred bird we call tarat in Kapampangan, or pakiskis in Tagalog, or in English, the brown shrike. And these migratory birds became integral to our ancestors' environmental knowledge. So picture this, you're a farmer centuries ago, hundreds of years ago, and all season long, you've been dealing with a plague of locusts, a plague of pests that have been destroying your crops. And on top of that, the typhoons have been brutal, flooding your fields, threatening your community's very survival. So if you think about it, your people are basically in crisis mode, wondering if this will be the year that the harvest fails completely. Then suddenly, you hear this sound. This distinctive chattering call echoing across the fields. Finally, the tarat birds have arrived, and with them, the cool northern winds of Amihan. So on the surface, these birds look very cute. But the thing is, they don't just show up randomly. They systematically devour every single locust, every single pest that's been threatening your harvest. The tarats are literally saving your rice crop, which means that they're saving your community's food supply for the entire year. And this will help you prevent mass starvation, preventing famine. And there's a lot of oral traditions about the tarats saving communities from famine. So if you think about it from the perspective of a farming community, from an indigenous society that depends entirely on successful rice harvest, this is nothing short of miraculous. So when you hear that distinctive chattering call of the tarat birds, three things come to mind, three critical things. 1. The dangerous storms are ending. 2. The harvest is about to begin successfully. And 3. It is time to celebrate survival and abundance. And that is why many of our ancestors considered the tarat bird miraculous, mythical, or even sacred, because these birds were living proof that the season of plenty was beginning, that the community would survive another bountiful year. And we'll talk more about the tarat birds later in the video and their relation to Christianity. But for now, let's talk about the bountiful harvest. Okay, so here's the thing. Our traditional holiday food in the Philippines, from ube to puto bumbong, all of these tells us a much deeper story that most people don't even realize. Growing up in Angeles City in Pampanga, I remember when the cold winds of Amihan arrived. That is when these special treats started appearing in our kitchen. I vividly remember watching my grandma stirring her deep purple aleubi for hours, and she would make me try stirring it myself. And to this day, she always tells me I don't stir it correctly or I'm not strong enough to stir it. But anyways, I remember the kitchen being warm with the earthy scent of suklating baturol brewing in the stove. I remember the splinter I got when making my first parol. Growing up in this place, surrounded by this culture, growing up in the culinary capital of the Philippines, I have a lot of vivid memories of a lot of these sumptuous, yummy, mouth-watering holiday food. And what is fascinating is that, unknown to most Filipinos today, it was only during Amihan, during the season of rebirth and rebuilding, that many of our most treasured holiday ingredients can actually be grown and harvested. For example, those gorgeous purple puto bumbong, steamed inside bamboo that you see outside churches during Simbang Gabi. Those come from pirurutong. Pirurutong is a red upland sticky rice that can only be harvested during the Amihan season. So no wonder it became so connected to our longest celebration period. And the same with lakatan. And no, I'm not talking about the banana. I'm talking about the rice. In Kapampangan, lakatan also refers to the specific sticky rice that we use in dozens of our traditional desserts, our countless rice cakes, for example. And our elders would get excited when the red lakatan variety or lakatan maluto was ready, because that meant that we could start making duman. Now, duman are these, green young grains of glutinous lakatan rice that get toasted and pounded and pounded to make desserts or toppings for treats like the rich, creamy, nutty, traditional hot chocolate we call suklating baturul, a specialty of Angeles City. But the thing is, duman only comes from lakatan maluto, a very rare type of rice only grown in one place, in Santa Rita, Pampanga, and only harvested exclusively during the Amihan season. And that ube that my grandma would spend hours stirring, this mouth-watering dessert, this alone connects us to centuries of indigenous knowledge and culinary traditions. In fact, our indigenous Aita communities have been cultivating ube, during the Amihan season for thousands of years. So yeah, the global and trendy ube, this deep purple ube, has a much deeper roots, like literally deeper roots, and cultural significance that most people today, including most Filipinos, don't even realize. And these are just a few examples. So just imagine all of these culinary treasures, appearing together in one season, during the same harvest season. That is the abundance that our ancestors built their celebrations around. So as you can see, there's a pattern. Celebrations actually follow the cycles of nature and abundance, and not just some, fixed calendar dates. Now here's the thing that most people often overlook about our motherland. The Philippines, unknown to many, is actually home to over 100 ethnicities and cultures. And each of them have their own unique stories and traditions and everything in between. I know a lot of what I've shared today focuses on Kapampangan traditions. But the thing is, apart from it being part of my roots, apart from being part of Kapampangan myself, it is also a case study that, reveals how sophisticated our ancestral understanding really was, especially about the deeper roots of our celebrations in the season of Amihan, this season of rebirth and rebuilding. But we have to remember that different regions across our islands have different seasonal rhythms. For example, Northern Luzon experiences different monsoon patterns than Mindanao. Mountain communities, they would read different natural signs than coastal societies. And like I mentioned earlier, these are just pieces of a much bigger puzzle. So just imagine, the treasure trove of sophisticated environmental knowledge that we have across our diverse islands. Just think about it. What did the Ilocano elders teach about their seasonal celebrations? What special food appeared in Visayan households during their harvest season? What environmental knowledge did, Maranao communities preserve. Kasi each region developed their own ways of reading their local environment, of reading Mother Nature. And as a historian and a culture bearer, this diversity of knowledge across our islands is truly fascinating. You know how different communities develop their own ways of reading Mother Nature and the world around them, along with the wisdom, traditions, and values that we all share across our 7,000 islands. Pero wait lang. If these traditions and celebrations are so ancient, then what about Christianity? How exactly does Christianity fit into this history? I mean, obviously, we're talking about Filipino Christmas traditions in the Philippines. But the thing is, Christianity didn't arrive in the Philippines until 1521. So for example, in Kapampangan tradition, the arrival of the sacred tarat birds happens to coincide with the Catholic feast of Saint Nicholas of Tolentino, or the Fiesta of Apongkulas. Now on the surface, that timing was coincidence. But the thing is, it is exactly what made religious syncretism possible, when existing cultural practices got layered with new religious meanings and stories. And you know, this kind of cultural adaptation is not unique to the Philippines. In fact, Christianity has, this long history of incorporating local traditions wherever it spreads. And other examples of Christmas traditions with non-Christian origins actually includes the iconic Christmas tree and the poinsettia flower. Christmas trees come from Germanic pagan traditions around the winter solstice, and the poinsettia flower that we now associate with Christmas was actually called Cuetlaxochitl by the Indigenous Aztec and Maya of Central America. And this flower only blooms between October and December. But the thing is, the Aztec and the Mayans have already using this flower for a variety of purposes long before any contact with the Europeans. And even celebrating Christmas itself on December 25th was likely chosen to align with existing Roman festivals around the winter solstice. And there's a lot more examples of these syncretisms around the world. So what happened in the Philippines follows the same historical pattern. Christianity didn't erase the seasonal celebrations already taking place, but instead, it layered new names, new stories, and new religious meanings onto celebrations and traditions that were already deeply embedded in our culture. And actually, before I forget, a great example of this would be our iconic parol or Christmas lanterns. Unknown to many, this spiritual tradition of using lanterns during celebrations can actually be traced back to pre-colonial Kapampangan practices like the Daon. So for those who may not know, Daon is this Thanksgiving ritual offerings to the dead, where lanterns lit the pathways and guided the spirits of our ancestors. And I actually have, separate videos about these topics. One about the roots of parol, and another one about our Day of the Dead traditions, like Daon. So make sure to watch them after this one. So what exactly is the point? Why should any of this matter today? Why should any of this matter for how we celebrate today? Just think about it. Understanding our traditions, understanding our deeper roots, actually changes everything about our celebrations and deepens our understanding of who we are as a people. Our ancestors were not just randomly picking September to start partying or celebrating. They were reading Mother Earth's natural calendar, wind patterns, bird migrations, and harvest cycles. They understood natural cycles that ensured community survival and abundance. And for Filipinos everywhere, for us today, whether in the Philippines or across the diaspora, understanding these deeper roots creates stronger connections to our ancestral knowledge, a better understanding of our own identities. So think of it this way. When my grandma is making her ale ubi, apart from cooking this dessert, this mouth-watering ube, she's also participating in a centuries-old indigenous traditions. And when families gather together to make parol, they're continuing practices that bridges our pre-colonial spiritual traditions with contemporary religious celebrations. And this instinct, this Filipino instinct of celebration, it comes from our ancestors. They understood that marking seasonal transitions was essential, that sharing abundance was essential. Strengthening community bonds through ritual and celebration was actually how our people survived and thrived. We as a people find reason to throw parties for everything. We extend celebrations as long as possible. And throughout all of this, we always center food and family and community gatherings. It is all embedded in our DNA. And all these layers built on each other over the centuries. Indigenous environmental wisdom, colonial religious adaptation, modern commercial factors. And of course, at the heart of it all is our deep cultural instinct for celebration. All of these created something uniquely beautiful, something that connects millions of our people all around the world. So when September comes and the celebrations begin, you're not just celebrating the bare months. You're not just counting down 100 days before Christmas, but you're also following the same rhythms of abundance and survival, the same rhythms of Mother Nature that our ancestors lived by for thousands of years. Now I'd love to hear about your family traditions in the comments below. Or better yet, call your elders today. Call your grandparents today, or your parents, or your titos and titas, and ask them about, the traditions they remember growing up. Because our elders are living and breathing libraries. And trust me, you'd be amazed at the many stories they are keeping. But don't just stop at listening to their stories. I want you to write them down. I want you to take a video or record their voices. I want you to document everything that they tell you. Kasi, like what I tell my own students, if we do not document our own stories, our own histories and traditions, our own cultures, someone else will. And who knows what they'll write about our people. Or worse, if we do not document any of these, all of this knowledge and wisdom might just disappear. And if you want to dive deeper into our people's rich histories, cultures, and traditions, and everything in between, I've actually made hundreds of videos on this channel. And I've also written several books about the Philippines and Southeast Asia, all about uplifting the narratives of our people. So don't forget to check them out in the links below. Maraming salamat po, Orin Kapampangan, dakal pong salamat kay Hongan and in Bicol, Diyos mabalos. See you next time, Orin Tagalog kita gets Orin Kapampangan, Mikitix and in Binisaya, kita ay ta.